I stood in front of the salon mirror, scissors still in hand, staring at the woman in the reflection. Her hair was done, her makeup neat, her expression composed. And yet, something was gone. 3 months ago, I would have said she looked happy. But now I could only see the outline of who I used to be before I caught Richard feeding lies over the phone while sneaking away with a woman who was definitely not on any fishing trip. 40. That's where I was. A hairstylist with a steady stream of clients, a tidy home, and a heart still aching from betrayal. I didn't cry much anymore, but there was a stillness inside me that hadn't been there before, like the tide had gone out and forgotten to return. The only thing that had kept me tethered to any sense of joy was knowing Ethan was coming home. My son, 21 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy smile and the kind of inner stillness that made people trust him immediately. He was the kind of young man girls whispered about at the gym or stared at from across restaurant tables. But he never played into it. He was grounded, kind, and focused on becoming a CrossFit coach after he finished university. That nobility in him, something I didn't see much anymore in anyone, was like a light in a very dark place. He was arriving today. I checked the time again as I swept up the last of the trimmed hair from the salon floor. I'd taken the day off just for this. My phone buzzed and I grabbed it without even looking. Ethan just landed. On my way. My heart fluttered in that strange way it did when you knew something good was about to walk through the door. I rushed home, wiping down the kitchen counters even though they were already spotless, lighting a candle in the living room. The house had been silent for too long, and suddenly I needed it to feel warm again, like a place where laughter belonged. The front door opened just as I was setting down 2 glasses of iced tea. "Mom," he called out, and there it was, that familiar voice that filled a room effortlessly. I turned, and for a second I froze. He looked older. Not just in the way time passes, but in the way he held himself, like the world had shaped him since I'd last seen him. Still, his smile was the same, soft at the edges, with that dimple on the left cheek I used to kiss every night before bed. "Hey, baby," I whispered, and my arms were already around him before I could say anything else. We stood there for a moment longer than usual, his arms wrapping around me tightly, protectively. I felt the heat of him, the strength in his back, the quiet comfort I'd missed more than I'd ever admit. "You look good," he said, stepping back, scanning my face. I smiled. "Flattery already? You must want something." He laughed, tossing his duffel on the couch. "Just missed you." Dinner was casual grilled chicken, quinoa salad, something light. We talked about his classes, his professors, the intense training regimen he was building. He'd already begun interning at a local fitness studio and had more than a few clients requesting him by name. I listened with quiet awe, marveling at how effortlessly he'd stepped into adulthood. Later that night, after we finished a movie we'd half-watched while reminiscing over childhood memories, I brought him a blanket. "Still get cold like you used to?" I asked, draping it over him. He gave me that half-grin again. "Only when you're not around." I paused for just a moment, the words heavier than he probably intended. Or maybe I just read too much into everything lately. I leaned down to ruffle his hair like I used to, and he caught my wrist, gently, his fingers warm around mine. "Hey," he said, voice softer now. "You okay?" "I am," I replied. "Now that you're here." But that wasn't entirely true. That night, long after he had gone to bed, I sat in my room staring at the ceiling. The house felt full again. His toothbrush in the holder, his shoes by the door, the faint sound of his breathing down the hall. I hadn't realized how much I missed having anyone near me. And with him, it was more than that. It wasn't just the silence he filled. It was something deeper, more intricate. The next morning, I found him already in the kitchen, shirtless, sweat glistening from an early workout. He grinned when he saw me. "Hope you don't mind. I used your yoga mat. My legs needed a stretch." I tried to smile, but the sight of him so raw, so male in the quiet intimacy of our kitchen, caught me off guard. My breath caught in my throat, and for just a moment, I had to turn away. "Of course not," I murmured, trying to steady my pulse. It's good to see someone using it. He walked over to the sink, refilling his bottle, then turned to me. You okay, Mom? Again, that question. I'm fine. Just getting used to having you around again. I hope that's not a bad thing. No, I said too quickly. It's not bad at all. And I meant it. But something was beginning to change. A warmth in the air, a pause in our glances, the way my name sounded softer when he said it. I wasn't sure what it meant yet. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The days began to blend into something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, contentment, a strange anticipation. Ethan was making himself entirely at home, slipping back into my life with a confidence that made it feel like he had never left.
But something was different this time.
He wasn't just visiting as my son. There was a maturity in him, a quiet attentiveness, as if he were observing more than just our usual routines. I first noticed it in the way he looked at me, lingering glances that lasted a beat too long when we cooked together, when I tied up my hair, or even when I bent down to grab something from a low cabinet. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. But then there was that morning. We were doing stretches on the back patio, the air warm with the summer breeze, sunlight dappling through the leaves overhead. I wore a fitted tank and shorts, nothing unusual, but when I looked up from a deep lunge, I caught him looking, his gaze fixed on my legs, then quickly flicking up to meet my eyes. He smiled, but something flickered in that smile. He didn't look away. Need help with that stretch? He asked casually, though his tone held something else, something unreadable. I'm fine, I said a little too quickly, standing up straight and brushing imaginary dust from my thigh. But thanks. His eyes didn't leave mine. That moment stayed with me. Later that day, I found a small note tucked under my coffee mug. His handwriting was unmistakable. 4 days till your birthday. Don't make any plans. Just pack a swimsuit, some light clothes, and, trust me, I've got everything covered. I stood in the kitchen, rereading the note at least 5 times. A part of me warmed at the gesture. Another part felt the flutter of nerves. Where are we going? I asked that evening as we lounged in the backyard. Ethan shrugged, grinning. Now that would ruin the surprise. But I don't like surprises. You'll like this one. He leaned back, folding his arms behind his head. You've earned something unforgettable. That phrase stuck with me. Unforgettable. The way he said it wasn't casual. It sounded like a promise. The next morning, I stepped into the kitchen and found him already up, shirtless again, slicing fruit with practiced ease. He greeted me with a grin that sent a spark of something I didn't want to name racing through me. Morning, birthday girl, almost, he said, handing me a cup of coffee exactly the way I liked it. You sleep okay? Yes, I lied. In truth, I had tossed and turned, caught in a swirl of thoughts I didn't want to entertain. About Ethan. About how close we were now. About how my body reacted when he brushed past me, or held my gaze a moment too long. We sat at the table, the sunlight hitting his face just right. I couldn't stop looking at him. His features had sharpened since last summer, his jaw more defined, his shoulders broader. He looked more like a man than I was ready to admit. You've really changed, I said, my voice lower than usual. His brow lifted slightly. Good or bad? Good. Just unexpected. He held my gaze, a quiet smile playing on his lips. You've changed too. You're even more beautiful than I remembered. I blinked. Ethan. He didn't apologize. He just sipped his coffee and looked out the window, as though he hadn't just upended my world with a single compliment. Later that afternoon, I stood in my room, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I had laid out a few summer outfits, swimsuits, and dresses. I chose carefully, not because I was unsure of the weather, but because I was unsure of something deeper. How I wanted to feel around him. I didn't know what this trip would bring, but I felt the air shifting between us. Every touch, every glance, carried something unspoken. That evening after dinner, we played cards on the porch like we used to when he was little. He let me win, though he'd never admit it. The night was warm, the cicadas humming softly, the wine we shared adding a subtle blur to my already tangled thoughts. "I still think you're cheating," I teased. He leaned in slightly. "I think you just like looking at me when you win." I laughed, but it caught in my throat. His eyes were too intense, too steady. "I used to be the only woman in your world," I said quietly, surprising even myself with the admission. "You still are," he said, without hesitation. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept hearing his voice, that tone of quiet certainty, the warmth in it, the possibility. I told myself not to think too much, that he was just being sweet, that I was vulnerable, that this was dangerous. But the truth hovered just beneath the surface, undeniable. Something was happening between us, and it was only a matter of time before it surfaced. I hadn't seen the Mediterranean in over a decade, not since my honeymoon with Richard, a thought that would have stung if it weren't for the fact that now, standing on the terrace of a villa tucked into the cliffs of Positano, I was here with Ethan. And he wasn't just my son this time. He was my anchor, my protector, my joy. I still remember the moment I stepped off the plane. The sun was soft and golden, the kind of light that painted everything in slow romance. Ethan had arranged everything: first-class tickets, a private car, even a villa with a view that stole the breath from my lungs. When I asked him how he could possibly afford it, he just smiled and said, "I wanted you to feel special." He watched me with quiet satisfaction as I spun slowly in the courtyard, overwhelmed by the scent of lemons and ocean wind. "I can't believe you did all this," I murmured. "I wanted you to remember how it feels to be adored," he replied. And I did. Every day of that trip, I felt it. In the way he carried my bag without me asking, the way he touched the small of my back when we walked through cobblestone alleys, the way his eyes softened when I laughed. Ethan hugged me more often than usual. Longer, tighter. It was never inappropriate, just warm, protective, like he was shielding me from every bruise life had ever left on my heart. We shared late dinners on terraces overlooking the sea, morning espressos by the window, and in every quiet moment, we teased and laughed like we hadn't in years. But there was something else beneath the surface now. Something unspoken. On the morning of my birthday, I woke to soft light spilling through gauzy curtains. I sat up to find a small box on the nightstand, wrapped in deep crimson ribbon. Beside it was a handwritten note. "Wear this tonight. I have reservations at 8. Happy birthday, Mom." I opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside was a dress, silky, black, impossibly elegant. I held it against myself, eyes wide, already imagining how it would look. I hadn't worn anything so beautiful in years. That evening, I stepped out of the villa in the dress and heels, unsure of myself, until I saw Ethan waiting at the base of the steps. He was breathtaking. A crisp white shirt, charcoal blazer, perfectly tailored slacks. His hair was swept back, and when he looked up at me, his jaw visibly tightened. "You look," his voice caught for a second, "like the reason Italian poets write sonnets." I laughed, covering the heat rushing to my face. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He took my hand and brought it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss against my knuckles. "Shall we?" The restaurant was candlelit, tucked into a cliffside terrace, with the sea stretching into black velvet behind us. Every table had fresh flowers and wine glasses that caught the glow of the lanterns. We were led to the best seat in the house, tucked in the corner where we could see everything, and yet felt completely alone. As the night unfolded, something between us shifted again. Ethan leaned in when he spoke, brushing a loose strand of hair from my cheek. He poured my wine with care, laughed at every one of my jokes like he hadn't heard better ones in class. The waitress smiled at us like we were honeymooners. At first, I blushed. Then I found I didn't want to correct her. When the dessert came, tiramisu with a flickering birthday candle, he leaned in and kissed my cheek. "Make a wish," he whispered. "I already did," I murmured. "And he's sitting across from me." His hand found mine under the table. We didn't say anything more for a moment. And then it happened. I saw him. Across the restaurant, tucked into a dim corner, sat Richard, my ex-husband. He was laughing, leaning too close to a young woman with glossy hair and a glittering dress that barely covered her spine. My breath caught in my throat, and I instinctively ducked. Ethan noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" I kept my eyes down. "Don't look directly. It's Richard. With someone new." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Seriously?" I nodded, my fingers trembling slightly on my napkin. Without a word, Ethan stood, took off his fedora, and plucked my sunglasses from my purse. He slipped them onto my face with gentle precision, then pressed his hat down onto my head. "There," he said, adjusting the brim. "Now you're a mysterious movie star. He won't suspect a thing." I couldn't help but laugh. "And if he does look this way," Ethan added, sliding back into his seat with all the confidence in the world, "he'll assume you're with someone young, charming, completely smitten. And he'll hate every second of it." "You're enjoying this," I whispered. "Oh, immensely," he grinned. Sure enough, Richard looked over. Just once. I kept my face turned slightly, sunglasses and hat in place. Ethan reached across the table and took my hand in his, raising it to his lips again, this time holding it a second longer. Richard's smile faltered. I could see it from the edge of my vision. His brow furrowed, his gaze narrowing. Then he looked away. "You're terrible," I whispered, laughing quietly. Ethan winked. "I know, but for the rest of the night, something inside me glowed. Because for once, it wasn't Richard who had the power. It was me. Because I was with someone who made me feel beautiful, desired, worth celebrating." And in that moment, as the sea glittered and strangers watched us with quiet envy, I realized something that made my breath catch again, not from fear, but from possibility. I didn't want the night to end, and neither did he. The moment happened before I had time to stop it. We were still seated at our table, the candlelight flickering between us, the wine glasses half full and untouched. Richard glanced over again, his brows now furrowed, trying to make out who I was behind the glasses and the hat. Ethan followed his gaze. Then he looked at me. Something in his expression changed, like a decision had been made. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan leaned in and brushed his lips against mine. Not a teasing kiss, not playful. A soft, certain kiss. Like he wanted Richard to see. Like he wanted the world to understand. My heart stopped. Time seemed to collapse around that one moment. By the time I opened my eyes, Richard was looking directly at us, frozen, stunned. His date had turned to see what held his attention, and I saw her lean in, whisper something. He shook his head slowly, blinking as if trying to wake from a strange dream. Ethan smiled, took my hand, and helped me to my feet.
He didn't speak.
Just slid his arm around my waist and guided me through the restaurant like he'd done it 100 times. Like I belonged there in that moment with him. Once outside, the warm air kissed our skin, and laughter spilled from both of us before we even reached the corner. "Oh my God," I whispered, breathless. "Ethan, what was that?" He turned, eyebrows raised innocently. "Damage control." "Is that what you call it?" I thought it was quite effective. He grinned, the mischief in his eyes unmistakable. "Did you see his face?" I swatted his arm, laughing harder. "You're unbelievable." He caught my hand and spun me under the soft yellow glow of a street lamp, pulling me close again.
"No."
"You are." We wandered down a narrow street lined with cafes and flower boxes, the air fragrant with basil and orange blossoms. Just as we turned a corner, Ethan paused and pointed. "Let's get lemon gelato. It's hot, and we're celebrating." I gave him a look. "Celebrating what exactly?" He smirked. "The end of an era." Inside the cozy little cafe, we ordered 2 cups and sat at a small table near the open window. The gelato was tangy, sweet, cold. I dipped my spoon in, scooped a bit, and, before I even knew what I was doing, touched it to his cheek. Ethan blinked, stunned, a drop of lemon glistening just below his cheekbone.
"Really?" he asked.
I leaned in and kissed the gelato off his skin, soft and slow. He froze. The silence between us was full, of warmth, tension, of everything we hadn't said. His hand brushed mine under the table, and this time, neither of us pulled away. We left the cafe under a sky turning lavender, the city quieting into its nighttime hush. He guided us down toward the beach, sandals in hand, the sand cool beneath our feet. We walked in silence for a while, side by side, the only sound the soft rush of waves curling at the shore. "This has been," I started, then trailed off. He glanced over. "The best night of my life." I looked at him. Really looked. My son, my Ethan, not a boy anymore. Not the child I'd raised.
He was a man now.
And everything about this moment, the way he walked beside me, the way he saw me, felt like a tide I couldn't fight.
Didn't want to.
We lay down on the sand, side by side, staring at the stars. The ocean breathed in the dark, steady and slow. His hand brushed mine again. "I used to dream of nights like this," he said softly. "With someone special? With you." I turned to face him, my breath catching. "Ethan?" He reached out, his fingers tracing a line along my jaw. "I've loved you my whole life," he whispered. "But somewhere along the way, it changed. And I don't know when or how, but I don't want to hide it anymore." The stars stretched endlessly above us. And then we kissed. It was quiet, tender. No longer a tease or a shield. Just the truth between two people who had finally stopped running from it. There on the sand, under a blanket of stars and the hush of waves, the world fell away. And what remained was only us.